Hopefully we have better connection now. You'll find out. Normal hello there in the thread to see if anyone responds. Whether it would be nice. Okay. Vote for 24 hours. Yeah. And the transport. Seems like nobody else is on. Hopefully that's not lovely. Doing don't know why, man. Now I actually have a sort of a desk. There we go. Yeah. Okay, we're doing a gaming one, right? If you want to go live stream while we're doing ours. Well, top quality gaming. Funny, it's super good. Let's see. Excuse my God. Wow, it has problems. Oh, oh. My truth is heavy as I choke. Complacent as I struggle to breathe. Your noose wrapped around my throat. Confess you never wanna be the nameless, the faceless, the godless, the raceless, the helpless, the loveless, the voiceless, the faceless. I choose to sever all my suffering. Until then, I'm 10 seconds from panic. Hey, I can't escape that. I'm 10 seconds from panic again. No, nothing but I've been through this. The memory of my sins. My truth is heavy as I choke. Thin as I struggle to breathe. Your noose wrapped around my throat. But you never wanna be the nameless, the faceless, the godless, the racist, the helpless, the loveless, the voice of the faithless. I choose to sever all my suffering. Until then, I'm 10 seconds from panic. Hey, I can't escape that. I'm 10 seconds from panic again. No, nothing but I've been through this. Memory of my I wanna break know you never did, so forget it, here we go. Can't escape it. I think again. No, nothing can help me live through this.
Let's see what we got. Come on. Hopefully it works. It's been at least a week or maybe a month now that I really am looking. Oh, come on. It's supposed to be working. If it works, I'll be amazed. Hopefully it'll work. It should work.
Look out my window. I would have to get out of my bed and open the blinds. Tap, tap, tap. I was genuinely terrified
Come on.
that someone was outside my window. I got out of bed
Hello
as
there.
quietly as I could. I thought any sound would entice my brutal death. I crept towards my closet and opened the door. I was no longer imagining home invaders waiting in the dark closet with their sickles sharpened. I was certain that there was a clear and present danger feet away from me outside my window. I searched my closet first. The only thing I could find was a wiffle bat. I almost laughed at the absurdity of me tearing open the blinds threateningly, wielding a plastic bat at the intruder. At least they would have some sort of decent comedic fodder for my tombstone. He died in his boxers, brandishing a plastic bat against a sword-wielding undead samurai. Found nothing else remotely feasible for a weapon. I crept open to the window with a plastic bat in my fist. The tapping was still emanating from the window. I cautiously raised my hand to the pull string. I hesitated a minute in paralyzing fear. I reasoned that I could try and peek out at whatever was still making the noise. I was debilitated by the prospect of peeking out only to see an eye staring back at me. Tap, been standing before the window for 10 full minutes now. The prospect that as soon as I opened the blinds, I could incite my violent and bloody death gave me considerable pause. I had and have so many dreams and goals that I didn't want to be interrupted by whoever was toying with me outside. I managed to pump myself up enough to grab the pull string. I listened to the inconsistent but continual noise coming from inches away. I decided to open it on the 10th tapping sound. Tap, 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 tap. The noise stopped. The lack of noise was so much worse than the incessant tapping. The silence seemed to be pregnant with malicious intent. Were they planning to blitz me now? Was their game over? Would they come crashing into my bedroom through the window? I held onto the plastic bat so tightly that my cuticles went white. I decided that it was now or never. I grabbed the drawstring for the blinds and pulled. Nothing. There was nothing outside. Had they fled? Had they tired of the mind games and moved on to more responsive targets? The sudden thought that they had dropped down to the lawn and were entering the house made me go to my bedroom door and lock it. My back was to the window. My hand just touched the door lock when tap, tap, tap. The sound was back. I whirled around and my heart was hammering in my chest. There was nothing outside. I remember thinking that this must be what insanity felt like. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was coming from the window, but there was nothing outside. I got close to the window and listened for the sound. My mind raced, trying to attribute the sound to something. I couldn't explain it. There was absolutely no reasonable explanation, but the tapping continued. I must have examined every inch of the window and the area around it to discover the source of the sound, but I had no luck. The sound stopped after a few minutes, and I decided that I was too tired to try and piece it all together. I lay back in my bed, I closed my eyes, and tried to sleep. But just as I was drifting off, tap, tap, tap. I didn't sleep at all for the rest of the night. I half expected the sound to come back the next night, but there was nothing. I don't know what would be worse, if the noise came back, or if it vanished without any explanation. If it started up, I could reason that it was the house settling, or the wood shifting and expanding in the cool summer night air. It didn't return, and my mind is still unable to think what had caused that sound. Was it some fiendish monster toying with my mind? Was it the spirit of the least threatening ghost possible? My parents came home the day after that, and I lived in that house for a few years before I went to college, and my parents moved to another state. In that time, I never heard that tapping sound again. It's almost weird how clearly I can remember all of this. I guess it's because this memory had such a profound impact on me. It helps me realize that sometimes the scariest thing in life isn't a corporeal thing. The scariest thing is a mystery, an unexplainable occurrence. The scariest thing is something incomprehensible to the human mind, even if it is something as minuscule as the sound of tapping on your window late at night.
Awesome. I'm just going to get on the internet right now and straight up look for
Horror in real life doesn't come suddenly. It's not a shock or a reactionary scream. Horror in real life is a slow realization that occurs over the course of years. It needs time to mold, decay, and spread. True horror is painful, often sad and tragic. It's a slow deterioration, separating you from all forms of comfort and happiness. It is this kind of horror that I have felt ever since I learned of my mother's passing. The circumstances of her death did not make things any easier. It wasn't a slow death with time to make amends, adjust, or say goodbye. She hadn't been fighting a disease or infection for years. She wasn't old and nearing the end of her life. Her death came for her quickly and unexpected. My mother, who, after divorce and my brother moving away, had been living alone. She kept herself busy by working for the church and caring for her parents. My last couple visits home, I'd noticed she seemed more fragile than she should for a woman her age. She had lost weight and seemed starved for visitors. There was also a look in her eyes that bothered me. They were sleepless, panicked, and broken. It seemed as if she wanted to tell me something, but couldn't. Instead, she would just smile sadly and change the subject. I was told that my brother found her late one night in October, locked in the downstairs bathroom, naked, lying in her own blood, with her wrist sliced open. She was 63 years old. Knowing that suicide is a mortal sin in the Catholic Church, and my mother being a devout Catholic, I couldn't help but wonder if something else was involved in her passing. Not anything scandalous or plotted, but something queer and uncomfortable that had been with me and my thoughts since I was a child. It dealt with our family home, and more particularly, the old wooden doors. It all began with trouble sleeping. For as long as I can remember, I always had trouble falling asleep in my parents' house. My grandmother told me that as a small child, I was prone to sleep terrors. She would watch me during the day while my parents were at work, and in the evenings when they went out to dinner. She told me that she was watching me the night a bad storm hit our neighborhood. A tornado had been spotted that night, but never touched down. However, the lightning did claim the house's electricity. My grandmother raced to my bedroom, worried the window facing my crib would break under the violent wind. There was something else she was afraid of as well. When my grandmother picked me up from my crib, she said she felt something in the room. Something new, different, and dark. My grandmother, who came to America from Italy as a child, told my parents that she had felt a strange presence that night and begged them to allow her to do a prayer to remove the Maloik, an old world superstition. But my parents, who were religious, believed in angels and demons, not folklore. They didn't want to dabble in curses and superstition. As I got older, the sleep terrors continued as nightmares. It was uncommon for me to wake up hours after going to bed, only to be too afraid to fall back asleep. Later in high school, I dealt with my insomnia by not sleeping for days until I could fall asleep quickly. It wasn't until I went away for college that I was able to rest peacefully. I attribute my difficulty sleeping all of those years to the doors in my parents' house. They were big, plain wood doors, simple, with no additional furnishings or decoration. They seemed ominous, nevertheless. I would spend hours looking at the patterns in the grain, finding shapes and images in them, like one would do with clouds. The more I looked, the more I saw, until the images seemed so clear to me. Strange, famished figures, naked with one leg or half a torso, rabid dogs, an old bearded man. I saw faces too, wide-eyed, mouths open, sometimes made of knots in the wood, all suffering as if the spirit of these things had somehow become trapped in the wood. The
bathroom door on the first floor was the worst. The lock on the doorknob was finicky. It would sometimes get stuck or give way, unlocking by itself. The bathroom door also had one of the strangest designs. In the center of the door, there was what looked like a woman in intense pain, as if she was in labor. Her face was contorted and blurred with vertical lines of grain. Tearing its way out of what I could only imagine as a stomach in my childlike imagination was a wide-eyed creature. The bathroom door in my dreams as well, or nightmares where I was able to escape. It would suck me into the darkness of the room. The door would slam shut and lock before I would have a chance to wake up, panicked and out of breath. The nightmares and the lack of sleep only made my already active imagination worse. The strange images in the door weighed on me. There was a door for every room in the house. I could not escape them. They were a constant presence, staring out at me from the wooden veneers. As a child, I began to see other things that found a way out of the trappings of the wooden frame. Not things I could look at directly, but rather things that appeared in my peripheral vision. The kinds of things that always begged to be questioned. Was someone there, or was my imagination getting the best of me? Over time, I got better at being watchful and looking out without shifting my gaze. One night, when I was 6 years old, I went into my parents' bedroom, feeling guilty that I wasn't yet asleep. I needed to be reassured and comforted because I had scared myself badly. My mother gave me a hug and asked me what was wrong. I told her that I see things out of the corner of my eyes. She asked me about their appearance, but I couldn't get a good look at them. As soon as I turned my head, they were gone. She asked me when the last time was that I had seen one. I told her that there is one with us right now in the corner of the room. My mother looked over at what to her was an empty corner in a room. She told me that maybe there were angels sent by God to watch and protect me. But they weren't. Something in the pit of my stomach would turn, and I would feel sick around them. They were motionless beings, staring blankly at me, only moving when I wasn't looking, slowly getting closer to me every time I looked away. I'd first discovered them in my peripheral vision outside my bedroom on the stairs late at night when I couldn't sleep. I would notice a dark shape peeking over the top stair, eyes glistening where nothing should be. I would try to quickly shift my gaze to refocus on them, but they were always gone. I'd eventually look away and then find them again at my bedroom door, and then even closer at my desk, ever present, just outside of sight. I decided that they must be demons, not the red-horned demons from cartoons, but something else. They seemed old, as if they were somehow misplaced, out of time. At night, when I would see them, I would be too afraid to move or do anything but stare blankly, not giving them a chance to move in closer. Sometimes I would hear them talk to me in my head. They would tell me to do things like wait in the corner of the room or flood my mind with images of strange, exotic places. I would sometimes do what they said, though nothing ever came of it.
Whatever this thing is.
My mother panicked one afternoon when she couldn't find me. She searched the entire house, eventually finding me in the bedroom closet facing the wall, where the voices had told me to wait. She was in tears when I told her about the voices. She bought me a rosary and asked if the demons were the reason I was having trouble sleeping. Eventually, my father blessed the house with holy water, room by room, as part of the celebration of the Epiphany, recommended every year by the church. It was after this, when I was still seeing them, that my my mother became bothered by the demons and their doors. It began to weigh on her as well. I grew up in a suburb just outside of Cleveland in a working-class neighborhood predominantly made up of Irish, Italians, Slovenians, where religion was very much a part of life. My parents were passionately involved in the church as well, and it was through them that I learned to take the sightings I was having very seriously. Instead of denouncing my demons as part of my imagination, my fears were reinforced and their existence confirmed through the power of faith and community. One night, we had a priest who was new to the parish over to our house to meet the family. After dinner, he asked me if there was anything I wanted to ask God for. I told him that there are demons in this house that hide in the doors, and I wanted them to go away. My parents shared a look of concern as my mother tried to explain. The priest looked at the doors before he left and assured me everything was okay. Later that evening, he spoke with my parents and something was settled between adults.
Let me take a closer look at those doors.
A couple of months later, my father did a small home renovation, which included replacing all of the doors with white ones. It was relieving for the doors to finally be gone, and I thought I would now be rid of the strange creatures and be able to sleep, but it was too late.
Okay.
My mother told me that she was having the nightmares now as well.
Sure what this is
Something about the doors, she would say. As I got older, I read about the possession of objects like the Annabelle doll, and how the Native Americans believed in evil wood spirits called Wakakuna. But I mostly ignored the demons, and I eventually stopped seeing them. Despite my mother's wishes, I no longer went to church and I refused to talk about religious matters or anything involving the strange things I'd seen and felt in the house. I told myself that the horrors I faced as a child were due to my overactive imagination and strict religious upbringing. By the time I left for college, there had been no talk of doors, demons, or nightmares for a long time, although I would still occasionally get that sick feeling in my stomach late at night when I was near the downstairs bathroom door. My parents would later divorce, my mum keeping the house and working at the church. I moved away for work to Twin Falls. It wasn't until my dad called to tell me about the circumstances of my mother's passing that I began to wonder if something more had happened to my mother. I made the trip home to find that my childhood neighborhood had been hit hard by the recession. It was now only a faded memory of the town I grew up in. The corner ice cream parlor was now a get cash fast lender, and the streets were relatively empty and bleak. Houses were boarded up, and my old high school had closed. Parked at a red light, I watched the traffic lights signal to empty streets. My parents' house even looked different, old, and not as well kept as it was when my father had lived there. The grass had been overrun with weeds and the siding was dirty. We stood in front of the house that afternoon after the funeral, my brothers, father, and I. My brothers explained to me how my mom had been stressed, the mood swings had been violent, and her sleeping pattern was erratic. She would go for long periods of time without sleeping, and then fall into a deep sleep for days. My brother told me how late one evening, after work, he had gone over our mother's house to check on her. It had been 2 or 3 in the morning by the time he had arrived and let himself in, finding our mother in the kitchen making breakfast. He told me she had been confused about the time and had thought that it was morning. He explained that she was trying different medications to help with the insomnia, and the doctors had thought the mood swings and suicide could have been a side effect. I told them about how I used to have trouble sleeping in a house, and about the demons and the doors. They laughed. They were too young to remember. I told them that I thought I was going to sleep better after Dad had replaced the doors, but it wasn't until college that I slept well. My dad stopped me and told me that he never replaced the doors. He had just painted them white.
That's weird. And by the way, I never replaced the doors. I just painted them.
It all started when I was about 8 or 9 years old. Actually, I guess it may have been earlier, but that's around the first memory I have of it. See, I've had sleep paralysis as long as I can remember, although it is rare now that I'm an adult. Most people that I've told about this have assumed I'm just scared of the dark or have bad nightmares. That's not it, although I am, and I do. I've always had very vivid dreams. When I was dreaming, I was there. I could see, smell, hear, and feel. I was also a very adept lucid dreamer, having the choice to affect my dreams at will. That didn't work on nightmares though, and I often had nightmares before these episodes. Horribly vivid nightmares, almost every night. Dreams of falling, fire, death, being alone in empty space, but mostly monsters. And those were the worst. Some of them were your classic 80s slasher film icons, Jason, Freddy, etc. I think my mom let me watch those movies a little too young, along with reading Stephen King, but she's still my hero. Those usually involved running and hiding while being in a strange place, usually creepy abandoned buildings or out in the woods. The monsters that didn't come from movies were way worse though. Dreams come from your subconscious, supposedly, so I guess somehow my mind created them. Although as a child, it seemed like they were from the depths of hell. Twisted, grotesque things, sometimes vaguely resembling a human form, with missing limbs or too many, hideous faces with skin missing or eyes hanging out of sockets. Some were not human at all, however. Giant creatures with wings and razor-sharp claws and teeth. Black shadows with red eyes that would just stand in the corner and watch me while I went about mundane tasks, like homework or watching TV. Sometimes I would wake up before they got me. Not always. People say you're not supposed to die in dreams, but I have many, many times. I've fallen and hit the ground. I've burned up in fire, been stabbed and sliced. I've even had a dream where I was at a funeral that turned out to be mine. I didn't go back to sleep that night. Well, I'm not really scared of the dark, per se, or even scared of the nightmares. I'm afraid of waking up in the dark. Let me explain what a typical night was for me when I was younger, and maybe you can start to understand. I would fall asleep in my bedroom with the TV on, mostly for light. Sound would just be loud enough to make out what they were saying. Sometimes I would fall asleep on the couch with a light and sound coming from my parents' room before I had a TV in my own room. Then the dream would start. The worst one ever, which I had often. I don't know how rare reoccurring dreams are, but I feel I get more than my fair share. It would start with me waking up in my own bed. I would be viewing as though from my own eyes, rather than third person as a lot of dreams were. I would look over at my alarm clock and it would say 3:33 a.m. Always. Then the fear would start. I knew what was coming, but powerless to prevent it. I would slowly place my feet on the floor and stand up while stretching and yawning. I'd start to head to the bathroom. Not sure how I know the bathroom was my destination, as I never made it there. And I would trip on something. crashed on the floor, lying there, cursing myself and looking under my bed. There is nothing there, and I mean nothing. The meager light in my room should penetrate at least a few inches into the darkness, but it's like a wall of black shadow, an empty void, and I freeze with fear.
Basically become a vlog.
Suddenly, two small blue orbs of fire appear,
Look,
directly eye level with me. The eyes of some unknown being staring into my soul. Its breath was the worst part. You could see it and smell it at the same time. I only know it was breathing because it came out in a fog, like when you're outside in winter. Only it wasn't cold in my room, and the breath upon my face was cold enough to chill me to the bone, and the stench. It was as though someone took dead animal carcasses and dirty diapers and lit them on fire with 1,000 matches, like sulfur, burnt hair, and feces. My mind would be screaming, "Run! Hide!" My body is frozen. I am hyper aware. I can feel every muscle in my body tense up in preparation, but nothing happens. Then it grabs me. I see nothing, no limbs of any sort, but I am dragged under the bed. Then I'm in total blackness. I can feel its disgusting breath on my neck and hear my heart beat. But my sense of sight has totally abandoned me. I don't feel arms around me specifically, but I am being held there. It feels like someone has wrapped a blanket made of flesh around me, but it is stronger than I am and holds me completely still. Then I feel its tongue slowly lick from my neck to my ear, as though tasting my fear. In a voice I can only describe as broken glass soaking in blood, gravelly and grating, but wet, it whispers, "What do you like about playing under the bed?" That's when I snap out of it. I struggle and fight, swinging my elbows and kicking my legs hard as I can, eventually loosening the creature's grip, and I would wake up. Here's where the real fun begins. I would be completely frozen, sometimes to the point where I could not even open my eyes. Sometimes that would be all, just frozen for a minute or two, then I would snap out of it. I'm getting a little freaked out just thinking about it. The memories are that vivid as it comes out. Other times, the nightmares followed me. I remember once I was lying there, frozen, trying to force my eyes to close, when I heard that same thick, gravelly voice. "Come back under the bed. The games were just starting." I couldn't turn my head to look toward the sound. Not sure I would have, even if I could. But I could feel its cold breath on my ear. I guess I must have screamed, although I don't remember doing so, because my mom ran into the room and turned on the light. I swear I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye melt into the floor, heading back under the bed. She checked, assured me there was nothing under the bed. I still don't know what to believe. According to the therapists and counselors I've talked to, I was experiencing visual and auditory hallucinations common to sleep paralysis. They don't know how real it was though. When I would wake up in bed, once able to move, I would jump off my bed, making sure to stay well away from the edge, run to my parents' bedroom, and crawl into bed with them, sadly, until I was about 14. Oftentimes, though, I would not wake up in my bed as I had fallen asleep. Sometimes, after that specific dream, I would wake up on the floor next to my bed, which was the worst, especially if the paralysis kicked in, which was often. I've woken up on the couch, on the floor in my parents' room, on the kitchen floor, in the empty bathtub, even once on the porch. On these occasions, I would sometimes find scratches and cuts on my body, often small, although I had a 6-inch gouge across my ribcage. I still have the scar. The therapist said this was due to sleepwalking and running into things. My grandmother had a very different view of things. I loved my grandma. She definitely wasn't your regular sweet old lady. My grandmother had a deep appreciation for the occult. When I told her about my dreams, she crossed herself and did a weird little evil eye hand gesture. I asked why she was freaking out. "My dear, 333 is a time of evil," she explained. 3 is a number of Satan. 3 a.m. is the witching hour, dear, and the veil between realms is thin. Reality can be warped. It was more likely that it was an actual demon trying to drag you to the underworld. You are lucky to have survived the attacks. She also told me that I wasn't sleepwalking as the therapist suggested, but actually in another, I guess you'd say, alternate plane or dimension, or even underworld. We always thought she was a little crazy. Now, I'm not so sure. I wish she was still alive to help my family. Recently, my 7-year-old son has been waking up in the middle of the night, right around 3:30 a.m., screaming about the monster with blue fire eyes. I was holding him after one recent episode, telling him that it was a dream and he will be okay. He kept repeating the word no. When I got him to calm down a little, I asked why he was saying no. He said he doesn't want to play under the bed. It was an utterly normal day for me. Well, actually, I'd gotten a parking ticket and a jury summons, so it was a pretty bad day for me. However, neither of those would seem of any consequence when I got home at the end of it to find my computer infected. But maybe I'm going a little too fast. Let me take a step back and we'll start from when I returned from work that day. As always, the things I did was go through the mail. Feel free to imagine my aggravation at the summons here. It didn't help either that everything else was junk mail and bills. Whatever, just one of life's many joys. Preferring to relax a bit before dealing with them, I went straight to my computer to do, well, nothing at all. Just some browsing, check my email, etc. Doing nothing can be good for the soul. I noticed my computer running much slower than usual though. Certainly slower than it was just yesterday. My first reaction was to look at my taskbar to see if my antivirus was updating, or maybe Windows was downloading new features or something. You know, the usual culprits. But alas, no such luck. I tried to put up with the slow speeds for a while, just wanting to get a level head before I had to deal with troubleshooting this thing. Yet another nuisance on this day that seemed so right for them. Eventually, my patience reached its limit though. My attempts to relax at the terminal having crashed and burned. I went to address this problem now, determined to find a way to wind down if it killed me. Upon opening the My Computer folder, a red flag raised. My hard drive had no free space left on it at all. To put things into perspective, I have a 1 terabyte hard drive with almost nothing on it. I got this computer from a friend of mine. much techier than I, and while I don't know nearly as much about computers as she, I know that a terabyte is a lot of space, and that my entire computer didn't even use 10% of it yesterday. Clearly, something was going on, and I suspected some kind of virus or malware. I've heard there are some out there that will create garbage data on your system, flooding it with pointless files just to fill it up and make it run slow. I'd always wondered what possible benefit there could be in this, but my friend told me there are some scammers who will infect a computer with one of these viruses, then try charge you a fee to clean and speed up your PC. Fortunately, I hadn't received any such contact yet. Still, my suspicions seemed grounded. I gave up and performed a scan with my antivirus program. Sure, one might think a quick scan would be faster, but if it didn't turn up anything and I was then forced to do a full scan afterwards, it would just wind up taking longer than if I went with a full scan from the start. Kind of a roundabout logic, but I just wanted to get this resolved so that I could finally just relax at my computer. I went to watch some TV for a while. Nothing good on. I really just wanted to go browsing. A couple hours later, I heard the little scan complete chime from my speakers and went to go examine the results. No viruses, no malware. I was baffled. However, there was one thing of note on the screen. One file could not be scanned due to corrupted data values. The window had 3 options: list, report, and dismiss. I clicked list to see the details of the file, and it showed a file that made up a bunch of square characters. Square.anima was the file name. This was no file that I put there, and I'm sure it wasn't there before. I'd never installed any kind of language extensions on my computer, so the file name was written in characters from some other language, maybe Japanese or Arabic or something. I'd also never heard of the .anima file type, but that could wait. The file location was listed in some secluded subfolder of System32. That's where viruses like to hide out, right? I made my way to the folder and examined the file. As expected, it read as an unknown file type. My computer didn't know what program would open it. Not that I had any plans of doing so just yet. Besides, what surprised me more was the file size, or rather, the lack of one. There was no file size listed. That is, it was just a garbled mess of text, if you could call it that. It looked like some sort of glitch, but maybe they were some kind of special characters. I'd seen people make signature art using what looked like garbled messes of text before. One of the first things I learned about computers was that a computer does what you tell it to, not what you want it to. That is, everything happens for a reason. Someone had to program this behavior, make it display like this. I didn't know what the file was, but I knew I didn't need it spamming up my system, as I was sure it was doing. So of course, having found the little bugger, I immediately deleted it. All the problems went away. I was able to browse in peace once again. The traffic ticket was overturned, and I managed to weasel out of my jury duty. That's what I'd like to say. Instead, a little Windows message popped up, telling me that the file could not be deleted. Access was denied. There was no question at this point. Definitely some kind of virus. I tried and tried, but nothing I did was able to get rid of the bugger. After 4 attempts, the second window appeared over the usual "cannot delete" message. This one was formatted like a Windows message, except that there was no title in the top bar of the window, and there was only one word of text: stop. This was accompanied by 2 choices: yes or no? I considered my options, but knowing that this was a virus, and it was unwillingly going to allow me to delete it, I chose yes. Thankfully, the window terminated as it should have, and I went back to the Explorer window. I decided to do some research, as I probably should have done before messing with that file at all in retrospect. Putting up with the incredibly slow browsing speed, I ran a search for the file name by copying the characters. When that turned up nothing, I just tried to search for the .anima file type, which I'd never heard of. No results. Maybe this was some brand new kind of virus. Maybe the antivirus software hadn't found a way to recognize it yet. No one online had encountered it thus far. Maybe I was its very first victim. I was outraged. This is just perfect, I said to myself, spewing all sorts of vulgarities, the likes of which would have resulted in no less than a dozen slaps from even the saltiest of nuns. I didn't want to deal with this right now. I didn't want to deal with it ever. But I especially didn't want to deal with it now. I left the computer for a while after that to just find some other way to wind down. I wasn't that successful. The next day, I was still pretty annoyed, but I was at least a little more level-headed than I was the day prior. And this was my weekend, so I would have plenty of time to figure this out. I called up a friend of mine whom I'd gotten the computer from, and she attested that she had no knowledge of any such file on it, nor of how it could have gotten there. She did offer to help me troubleshoot it, thankfully. After I told her all that I had done thus far, she seemed pretty convinced of my theory, that it was some brand new kind of virus, without any currently known method of dealing with it. Unfortunately, she wasn't nearly skilled enough to try picking apart an unknown virus fresh off the market, so her help ended there. Great. With nothing left to do, I decided to experiment with the file. It took a full day to back up my important files on a separate drive, hopefully without the virus carrying over with it. And the following day, I was able to start dealing with the thing. The file wasn't a standalone executable, or it would have run by itself when I double-clicked it. Having no knowledge of what program the file was intended to run with, I started cycling through all the programs on my computer, trying to find something that would work. First up was Notepad. As I found, a lot of unknown files can be read in text format. This one turned up as a bunch of the missing character box symbols again. So it could be read as a text file, but it was all in another language. I guess that's a start. For lack of anything else to try, I continued through the list of programs. Next up was Windows Photo Viewer. I didn't expect anything to happen, since if the file had been opened in Notepad, that meant it had to be some kind of text-based file, right? Well, somehow, Photo Viewer was able to read the thing, and it came up with an image of a nice little suburban house somewhere. If it weren't for the subtle cultural hints, like the buildings in the background and the style of mailbox, I would have assumed it to be an American suburb. Unfortunately, there wasn't any kind of text anywhere in the image, so I couldn't determine the country of origin. I tried to move the window to the side for later, but accidentally closed it instead. So I tried to open the program again with Photo Viewer, and it worked again. But this time, I got a different image. This one of the inside of a car driving on a brick road from the driver's perspective. How was this possible? Even assuming the file could be read in both Notepad and Photo Viewer, it's just one file. Opening it should come up with the same result each time. If this was a virus, it seemed to mess with the functions of my machine something fierce. I opened the file once again in Photo Viewer, and this time, I got a string of big, bold, white symbols on a black background. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were Russian characters. Is that where this file is from? Russia? And the images too? Unfortunately, it was an image, so I couldn't copy the text and paste it into a search engine. I was curious though. I decided to take a screenshot of the text so I could look at it later. One print screen and MS Paint open later, I tried to paste what I copied, but again, the image wasn't the same. This time, it was a young woman, dressed in formal attire, looking at the camera expectantly. It was the craziest thing. Every time this file appeared on the screen, it was a new image. From there, I used the undo and redo keyboard commands to quickly erase and repaste the image over and over again. Every time it was.
Shout out to Christopher Patelio for your humor and for actually doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Something different. A grocery store, a
Okay.
theater, someone's living room, a man looking into a mirror, a pair of grave sites. That, the next time I refreshed the image, I got this. It was a black screen with white text that read, "Get out." This made me jump a bit. Was this supposed to be addressed to me? Is this what the Russian text before translated to? Someone had to preload all these images into a slideshow and program them into this file. Maybe there were images of this message in all sorts of languages, and these were just the two I happened to encounter first. Still, something about the big, bold, white text message got to me, and I shut down Paint. Still, I was curious now. I wanted to know what other programs might be able to open this file.
I don't even know who
I tried Windows Media Player next, curious of how it might interpret the file. Apparently, it read it as audio. But curiously, the little seeker bar didn't move as the file played.
Tell me, why not open up another note? Just for here.
Bar stayed at the far left, like it might if it were playing some kind of online live stream. The audio was a very clear recording of several people talking in Russian. Hearing it, I was now more certain of what language it was. There was also a hint that I heard dishes clanking and liquid being slurped as the word washed came up from time to time. I could only assume this was a recording of some family dinner or something. Why it was in the file, I have no idea. The audio was pretty mundane. After 5 minutes or so of nothing particularly interesting happening, I closed out and, this time, tried opening it in VLC Media Player. This time, it was read as video. I don't know why it would be any different between the two players, but the same thing happened in VLC, where the time count went up, but the bar never moved. Due to my computer's infection, the video ran extremely choppily. But what I could make out seemed to be a first-person view of someone sitting in an office, working on an assortment of paperwork. At times, I saw the viewer's reflection on his computer monitor, and it looked to be the same man who was looking at himself in the mirror in that image that appeared before. Curious, just to see what happened, I skipped ahead with the seek bar, trying to find other parts of the video. but as soon as I tried to move it from its position, glued to the left of the side window, VLC crashed and I was forced to shut it down. When I did, another Windows message had appeared beneath the window. Again, no title in the top bar and only one line of text. Stay out. Again, the options were yes and no. Just to see what would happen this time, I clicked no. That may have been a mistake. The window didn't close, but out of nowhere, my computer started whirring as if it were under an incredible strain, and the screen practically locked up. I tried moving my mouse, but I was unable to move out of the stay out window, which still had both options selectable. Thinking that maybe the computer was having trouble processing the command, I once again clicked no. This time, the reaction was even stronger. Countless message windows began popping up over the current one, all of them identical. Stay out, stay out, stay out, stay out. One after another, they rapidly began popping up over the last, slowing my computer to a literal snail's pace. I tried to move the mouse, and it very, very slowly crawled its way away from the no button. Hoping to just end this calamity at this point, I got it to meander over the yes command and finally clicked it. Just like that, the window stopped appearing and the hard drive stopped whirring, and everything seemed to go back to normal. Or, at least, it went back to the way it was before I clicked no. The file was still there, and it still had to be taken care of. I tried once again to delete the file. This time, a message popped up reading, "Do not," with the only clickable option being, "OK." Odd. This message was different from the one I got last time I tried to delete it. Trying to X out of the message window did nothing. So, I reluctantly clicked OK, and it closed. I tried copying the file onto a drive, moving it off my computer. But I then received a Windows error message telling me that the file could not be moved because it is being accessed by another program. The same message came up when I tried just moving it to the desktop for easier access. I was curious to see whether this was true or not, and actually, I hadn't taken a look at my processes to see if maybe that was making my system drag so much. I opened up Task Manager and switched over to the Processes tab, and sure enough, at the top of the list was one called Anima. It was taking up almost a full 100% of my computer's processing power. Did that mean this file was not only occupying my whole hard drive, but most of my RAM as well? How big was this thing? Processed. Was it in another? No title. Please, no. These titleless messages weren't written by any Pulitzer Prize winner, that's for sure. The clickable options were no and no. Again, unable to X out. I clicked one of the two no's, and the window closed. Underneath it, there was the typical Windows message asking me if I was sure I wanted to force end the process. Glad that the virus didn't interfere with this function, I clicked End Process, and my hard drive whirred for a moment. Then, just like that, the process vanished. My CPU usage went back down to its normal levels, and finally, I was able to use the machine freely again. However, the file was still there in the folder. I could have deleted it then and there, but I wanted to check it once again, sure.
This works better. Probably about time to wind down this live stream at 6:19 in the morning.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. Damn, who knew? All the planes we flew, good things we've been through. Then I'll be standing right here talking to you about another path. I know we love to hit the road and laugh, but something told me that it wouldn't last. Had to switch up, look at things different, see the bigger picture. Those were the days, hard work forever pays. Now I see you in a better place. How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got? Everything I would do, you were standing there by my side. And now you gon' be with me for the last ride. It's been a long day without you, my friend. And I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. First you both go out your way and the vibe is feeling strong. It was small, turned to a friendship turned to a bond, and that bond will never be broken. The love will never get lost. And when brotherhood come first, then the line will never be crossed. Established it on our own when that line had to be drawn, and that line is what we reach. So remember me when I'm gone. How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got? Everything I would do, you were standing there by my side. And now you gon' be with me for the last ride. Let the light guide your way. Yeah. Hold every memory as you go. And every road you take will always lead you home. Oh, it's been a long day without you, my friend. And I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you
Yeah, about that one. For listening. Now we lost the finger. was actually the worst one I ever had in English. Really annoying when they actually have 4 units of the base. Right. Okay, now we can end our stream, I guess. Yeah, I don't want to. Now. Alright, there we go. Yeah, alert. Okay, ending the stream now.